Hello, and thank you for being with us. My name is Rodney Freeman. I'm the library director for the Riviera Beach Public Library, and I want to thank the city of Riviera Beach, Florida, and the Parks and Rec for sponsoring this program. This is our second to last MLK celebration program, and we are excited to have Nic Stone, #1 New York Times best-selling author, and the book is Dear Martin. Okay.
Boom.
Yes, this is an awesome book, and let me tell you how I came about this book. I have a my niece, my sister, who is 14 at the time, says, "Hey, Rodney, you're a librarian, so you like books and everything. How about you check out this one book?" And I was like, "What book is it?" It's called Dear Martin, and I was like, "Oh, okay, okay, I'm, I'm gonna give it a go." And I was reading it, and I was like, I first started off with like the first chapter, when he's talking to his girlfriend and everything and getting out the
Uh-huh.
car. I was just like, okay, this is kind of pulling me in. And then of course we'll get into it, but there was situations in the book, just dealing with everyday things that's going on, that we see, over the summer. It's just like it was like this was really captivating. I was like, this is a good book, and then you include Martin Luther King into it. I'm like, this is an interesting concept. And I was like, I had to, and I was just, even if we didn't, get you to come out, I would have been like trying to troll you on Instagram or something like that. How did you come up with this? And how did you come up with this inspiration? So I'm just going to go through, but I also wanted to read your bio before we get into some of the questions. So Nic Stone was born and raised in the suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and the only thing that she loves more than adventure is a good story about one. After graduating from Spelman College, she worked extensively in team mentoring and lived in Israel for a few years before returning to the U.S. to write full time. Growing up with a wide range of cultures, religions, and backgrounds, strives to bring these diverse voices and stories to her work. How was living in Israel?
Um, Interesting to say the
Yeah.
least. So my partner is an Israeli national. I met him. I went to Israel for a summer just because I wanted to like explore the land of the Bible. And I like to say I went looking for Jesus and found a really hot guy instead. And I married my husband the
Yeah.
next, like I think we dated for like 6 months before we got married. Cause it was one of those things where you can't move to America to be my boyfriend. I can't move to Israel to be your girlfriend. So it's like marriage or bust. And we did. We went into premarital counseling and decided to get married. And I lived there for 3 years. And it is a very interesting place, is what I'll say. I highly recommend visiting. I don't
Yeah.
recommend living there. Um,
Wow.
you see, I'm
Wow.
back in Atlanta
Yeah.
for good
Wow.
reason. Yeah.
Right. 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 Okay. Okay. Well, hey. Okay. So, again, thank you so much for being here. And before we get into the book, I just want to know what is Nic Stone reading? What books out there are you reading right now?
Honestly, I'm typically reading books that aren't out yet. This is my current read. It's called Ace of Spades. It
Hmm.
doesn't come out until like June. I think it comes out in June.
Yeah.
But I tend to read a lot of books that aren't out yet because people want me to say nice things about them.
Yeah.
So this is the current book that I'm reading. And then this actually came out on Tuesday. This is Wings of Ebony.
Oh.
Really solid book. The author's name is JL. This is her debut novel, and it's about like magic, like black girl magic, kind of
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
literal sense. It's real
That's
good
awesome.
too. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
highly,
And see,
highly, highly recommend this one. Highly recommend
okay.
it.
You said. Let me write that name down again. You said JL.
JL,
Oh,
Wings of Ebony.
okay. Wings of Ebony. Okay. I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna be on the lookout for that. Awesome.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
a good one.
So, again, the big question, what made you write this book, and why use Dr. King?
This is actually my favorite question ever when it comes to Dear Martin. So the inspiration for the book was the Jordan Davis story. November 23rd, 2012, Jacksonville. Jordan Davis is killed at a gas station over loud music. At that point, I had a 5-month old. So I'd had my first kid, and my son was 5 months old. And I hear about this story, and it just shook me to my core because, like, I don't know. There was something about the idea of my son who would eventually, he's a black boy. Eventually, he's going to grow up and he's going to look the same way Jordan Davis does. And the idea of people seeing him as a threat before they see him as a kid just kind of
Mhm,
like got down into me.
mhm,
So I decided to explore kind of the why behind all of the shootings that took place basically between 2012 and 2014. I wrote the
mhm,
book in 2015. So Jordan Davis was on my mind. Tamir Rice was on my mind. Mike Brown was on my mind. Um, let's see, there was another kid, Jordan Edwards was on my mind.
mhm,
There were all of these kids who had been killed by police officers or civilians. Trayvon Martin was on my mind. And I wanted to kind of dig into, like, what are the things that people believe about Black children that make
mhm,
them see Black children in such a terrible way?
mhm,
And then in 2014, when Mike Brown was killed, there were the protests that broke out in Ferguson, Missouri. I kept seeing these political figures get on TV and say things like Dr. King would never support this so-called movement. Like the Black Lives Matter hashtag became a movement around the time of really after Mike Brown's death.
right.
And so people took to the streets in nonviolent protests, and seeing people say things like, Dr. King would never. I was like,
Mhm.
what you mean Dr. King would never? Here in Atlanta, our mayor, there was a march planned here in Atlanta. Our
Uh-huh.
mayor got on TV and he said, all I ask is that you don't take the freeways. Dr. King would never take a freeway. What?
What?
Dr. King took like so many freeways, right? So like it was basically these terrible things happening to these kids and seeing how people are convoluting history, basically. Like the fact that the mayor of the city where Dr. King was born and raised would get on the news and say something completely false about this
Right.
city's biggest hero. Like I was like, oh nah, like I
Yeah.
gotta. So it made me
Yeah.
want to think about,
I got something to say.
yeah, a contemporary event through the lens of Dr. King's teaching. So that's how it all kind of came together.
That's what's up. What's up? One of the things that I really like the main character, Justice, right? And I was just thinking about, I'm like, where did Justice come from? Was he somebody that you knew and kind of used as inspiration? And like, how did you come about to form Justice as a
A lot of
character?
him is me. Like a lot of him is me and my own experiences. Like there's some stuff in that book that I literally pulled from my own life. Like the scene in the classroom where they're talking about the test scores.
Hmm.
So Justice gets into Yale early action. The white boy who's kind of the antagonist of the story
Yeah,
swears racism doesn't exist. He gets deferred and he's mad.
you're
Um,
right.
but when Justice lets this kid know like what his ACT score is, and it turns out that Justice's ACT score is higher than the white kid's like, no way, man. I literally plucked that from my senior year of high school. Like I was the only Black kid in my AP language and composition class. And I had a girl, like my ACT composite was 2 points higher than hers. And when I told her, she looked me dead in my face and was like, there's no way you got a higher score than me.
Really?
Oh, okay, cool. So you see, I was still so salty about it. Like 12 years later, I put it in a book.
Hey, those are some of the best things. You put them in a book. That's
Yeah,
cool.
be inspired. She follows me on Instagram now. It's fantastic. Just delightful.
Hey. Oh man. Okay, so that goes that brings me to the next question. So, and that's what I was gonna actually go and ask you about, like the fight with the classmate, on race, which was a big deal in the book. The friend from the neighborhood,
Hmm.
I thought that was really a good thing to put in. Like, you're not from where we're at anymore because you're going over there with the other kids. I dealt with that myself.
Hmm.
And then the interracial love interest. You know, you have all of these real world experiences, you know, in these characters. It's like I just want to know, how did you just how did you bring that all together? You know, and have these characters just be so relatable. Was it just the experiences that you were pulling from and what
Hmm.
was going on today? And what did you use to create those?
I mean, yeah, it's partially stuff going on today. It was partially pulled from my own experiences and partially just like I knew I was writing a book on race and racism. So I had to think of every possible race related thing I could, right? So, like,
Hmm.
interracial dating is a huge thing. And it's definitely, if I'm writing a book about race and I don't have something in there that deals with that, I'm not doing a good job writing a book about
Right.
race. And even the idea of Justice's mother being very opposed to him bringing home a girlfriend who was not African American, like, that's real. Like, my mom is
Yeah.
like that. My mom would have lost her mind if my brother would have brought home a white girl. That just wasn't
Yeah.
gonna happen in my house, right? So making sure, like, honestly, my goal with Dear Martin was to piss off as many people as possible, because
Mm.
it's when people get angry that they start seeing the stuff inside of them that needs to be addressed. Um, Myself included. Like, there were things that I was writing and I was like, ooh, this is ugly. I need to deal with this. Like, there's so much I learned from myself and about myself through the process of writing that book,
Mm.
that but I'm thankful for it, right? And I'm thankful for getting to incorporate a lot of these experiences and put them out in the world, shed some light on them. I think about what you were just saying about his friends from the old neighborhood and how, you know, I had that experience too. It's like once you start being in classes with white people, your black friends are like, nah, bro, we can't really rock with you no more. Like,
Right.
you hanging out with them, and it's a very isolating experience when you have this group of people over here who looks like you, but
Right.
doesn't like the fact that you associate with this group of people over here who doesn't look like you. And so you're just like in this space where like
Where you
nobody
at?
likes
Yeah.
you. Right.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating and complicated. But I will say that I do think that Justice comes to realize that it doesn't matter. He still has to decide who he's going to be out in the world, whether people like him or not.
Right, right. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that incident. In the it's the big incident where the gentleman, the two guys are in the car,
Hmm.
and the guy pulls up and is telling them to turn the music down, and he's irritated, and he shoots and he kills his friend. Spoiler alert, you know. So I hope I didn't ruin it for any of you guys, but you know, spoiler alert. But yeah, he kills a friend. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking when I reread the book, I was like, interesting because you have it where he gets convicted in the end,
Hmm.
right? And I was gonna ask you about that. It's you having it. Are you making a statement by saying that he's getting convicted? Because I'm thinking about the incidents that has happened since you know over the several years about trying to convict the actual cop and
Hmm.
how hard it is. And then when sometimes you do convict it, it's being overturned or they get lesser sentences.
Yep.
Um, just talk about that for a little bit because I know I actually saw some YouTube videos of you and I saw where you said that you actually had a cop in your family.
Yeah, my dad.
Yeah.
My father was a police officer for the first 23 years of my life, right? So,
Mm,
like, I'm watching all this stuff unfold on TV and seeing these people getting killed. And like, my dad was the first person I would talk to about it. So we talked
mm,
about training. We talked about, like, I got so much information from my father while working on this book. I think it made the book a
mm,
lot stronger. And he
mm.
was very supportive of what I was creating, like with the conviction. So the police officer was convicted on every count but the murder count, which is just like
Right.
what happened to Michael Dunn. So there was a mistrial declared on the murder count, just like in the Jordan Davis case. And then because I was, I'm the god of this world that I created. Like, I have
Mhm.
the cop taken out in jail. So like, while he doesn't necessarily ever get convicted of the main crime,
Yeah.
again, spoiler alert, he doesn't get to continue his life either, right? And I think that like for me, it was important to have some kind of restitution because I don't know, it just get things just seem so hopeless, you know, like case after case after case. Most recently, the Breonna Taylor case, like
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
infuriating and it just kind of sucks all the hope out of the world, right? Like when you see
Yeah.
something terrible that has happened and the people who did the terrible thing don't really suffer any consequences for it. Like that's like so in my books
Frustrating.
there are definitely things, there are definitely consequences. Yeah. And then the sequel, I won't spoil it, but like in the sequel, so the cop that originally profiles Justice's journey starts when he's profiled by a police officer while trying to help his drunk ex-girlfriend get home after a party. Um,
Right.
this police officer is killed in chapter 2. So we find
Hmm.
out in chapter 2 that he's been killed and that the person that killed him is the cousin of Justice's best friend and is also a boy that Justice grew up with. And
Right.
like the sequel is about that kid. This is a
Mm.
sequel. This is Dear Justice,
The justice. Yeah.
and it's about Quan. Quan's the kid who confesses to killing the cop.
Mm.
So in this book, we find out more about Quan's life. We find out more about like that other side, right? So like Justice is like the high achieving black kid who's headed to an Ivy League university, et cetera, et cetera. And this is about the kid who like joins a set and sells
Hmm.
drugs. And actually, he doesn't sell drugs, but he sells some other things and like gets involved in some stuff and gets arrested over and over again. But it was
Yeah.
important to me, even with the cops in this book, to make sure that like the kids come out on top, is all I will
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. 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 I have a question about, but I'll wait to the end for that one. So, okay. So, yeah, when you were writing this, in the journal entries, because that was one of the main, um, just attention grabbers for me is like how much thought you put into like the descriptions of justice writing to Dr. Martin Luther King. Did you ever think? Did you I was thinking it's like when you were writing the actual journal entries, did you think, okay, what did you ever come up with a response what Dr. King would say to some of these journal entries?
I didn't. You know, I think
Yeah.
so for me, the journal entries were more about this kid being able to express himself through the lens of what he's learned about Dr. King, right? So and that, like I said, was partially because I hated seeing the way people would use his quotes, use Dr. King's quotes in ways that I don't think he would have been cool with. Um, and I also just wanted to show, I think a part of it was highlighting the idea that, like, I find that there are a lot of people, specifically white people, who when a person is killed by police, when they're killed by a civilian, whatever, if a black person is killed and other black people get mad, there are a lot of white people who want to throw Dr. King at us, like, you should act like him. And I'm like, that's what we're
Mhm.
doing. Right. So like it was a lot of this was me trying to help Justice to see that the Dr. King that he was taught about is mishandled. And honestly, I have tried to think about how Dr. King would respond to some of this stuff, but I
Yeah.
do think that like he would just be a really good listener.
Mm. 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 Mm.
He would just
Yeah.
listen, you know, like I don't see him as a person who's going to like dole out a bunch of unsolicited advice.
Right.
But I think he would be like a mentor who's just going to listen to you and ask
Uh,
you questions. Like he's not going to
right.
tell you what to do. He's going to ask you a bunch of
It's
questions so you figure it out for
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And and that brings to the next question where at one point Justice actually stops writing him for a while. And then he picks it up at the end. And I wanted to ask you a question because he stopped writing him doing his kind of like his toughest parts, and what was going through your head to how did you because he was very consistent with writing him, and then he stops, and I felt like that connection, right? Um, I want to know what were you trying to convey at the end, because at the end he writes him he writes them when he's actually in school, Yale, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then he says, I'm here with my roommate, and I don't know if I'll get it because his girlfriend, who's of a different race, walks out, and he's looking at him. The roommate's looking at him crazy and everything. And but that connection when he was going through his toughest parts, what were you trying to convey with that? That's what I wanted to know.
I think that a lot of that is connected to the scene before. So the shooting, right? So there's a shooting that happens in the book. And during this shooting, like just before the shooting happens, you see Justice kind of grappling with what he should do.
Hmm.
This whole scene was inspired, like I said, by the Jordan Davis case. So you have this off-duty police officer who pulls up next to these two boys in this Range Rover,
Hmm.
and he is mad because their music is loud. He's like shouting some obscenities at them, and Justice is sitting there trying to figure out what to do, right? So he decides finally that he's going to turn the music down, but that's when
Hmm.
everything goes south, right? So, like him deciding to do what he thinks Martin Luther King would do to keep the peace, in that he kind of catalyzed what happens next. And I think that after that, he just wants to give up, right? Like
Yeah.
he's tired of trying to do the right thing. He's tired of trying to make sure that he's good. He's tired of trying to like be the good guy.
Yeah.
And so he abandons his Dear Martin project until the end, when he comes to realize that like it's kind of on him. Like he has to decide how he's going to
Hmm.
move through the world. He has to decide what he's going to do, who he's going to be, despite of how other people feel about him. And I think that him coming to that realization is what makes him pick up the pen and write one final letter.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. What for the teenagers reading this book? What themes do you want them to take away from this?
Honestly, the main one is on page 152, and it's exactly what I just said. The first two lines on page 152, I have a copy,
Mm-hmm.
um, are: you can't change how other people think and act, but you're in full control of you. When it comes down
Mm,
to it, the only question that matters is this: if nothing in the world ever changes, what type of man are you going to be? So
mm,
it's basically this idea that like we are all the master of our own, what we put out into the world, of our own like impression management, basically.
mm.
So whether or not somebody looks at me and thinks that like, oh, there's no way she could be a writer, I don't care. Like I am, right? So just like coming to a place where you recognize that really nobody has any bearing over where you, like, even the people that do sort of have a bearing over where you go, you can get around them, right? And I think I really want young people to recognize that they do have power. They are able to make decisions about their own lives, and they get to decide what they believe about themselves, where they want to go, how they're going to get there, etc.
So, where would you say justice is today? If you had to write justice, after all of this is gone, where is justice today?
Oh, that's a good question. I have him, he like ages very slowly because Dear Justice came out last year. So it came out 3 years after Dear Martin, and
Okay.
in that book it picks up exactly where it left off. So he's like the same
Uh-huh.
age that he was. And then there's another book coming in 2023 in this
Oh,
universe. Um,
okay.
and he will be like a sophomore in college. So he ages very
Oh,
slowly. So I'm
okay.
just gonna say that like right now he's like frozen in some like cryo chamber waiting to get out so we can age him a little bit further.
Okay, okay. He's in deep sleep right now.
He's
Okay.
in deep sleep, yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's gonna go into like civil rights law or something. Like I can see
Yeah.
him the three amigos like forming a law firm. Him, Jared, and SJ forming a law
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah. So what made you become an author? I mean, and then after that, what is advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Yeah, so I always loved reading. However, I didn't even think I could be a writer because, like, growing up, I never saw books that had me in them. I never saw books written by people like me. I'm 35, so I was born in 1985, up through the 90s. Like, I guess I could have been trying to read Toni Morrison, but like trying to read Toni Morrison as a fifth grader just wasn't going. It wasn't. I couldn't do it. I got into Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou and Alice Walker and then like 17 up, right? So
Yeah.
between like 12 and 17, I just didn't ever see me on the page or me making the pages. So I didn't think that I could write. It was just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, I like this thing called reading, but I don't know about writing anything. There was even a point where I said I could never write fiction. I literally said that out loud. I was like, I could never write fiction. I don't have the imagination. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
things, these are the messages kids get when they don't see themselves reflected in the stuff that they're reading.
Mm-hmm.
What changed that was I read a book series called Divergent by
Mm-hmm.
Veronica Roth, Divergent,
Yeah.
Insurgent, and Regent. And it was the first book series, first mainstream book series I'd ever read where the black character lives all the way through the end, and
Yeah.
that like cracked something open in my head, and I decided to give writing a try. The first thing I wrote wasn't terrific. Like, it's not
Yeah.
terrible, and you can find it online. It's actually, I posted it on Wattpad. But I kept going. It's like once you finish your first book, like once I finished my first book, I had to keep
Yeah.
going. Like I just wanted to like write more and more and more. And
Yeah.
my advice for the aspiring writers is to like just do it, like start. I think it's important if you want to be a writer to be a reader. Like I don't know anybody, like I don't know any athletes who don't watch the sport that they play, right? Like you're not
Mm-hmm.
gonna like try to play basketball but never watch basketball, because how are
Mm-hmm.
you going to know how to do it? And it's the same thing with reading and writing. Like if you're going to create a thing that people are going to read, you need to read yourself to see what these things are like. um,
Yeah.
Actually fun and write. I know a lot of aspiring writers who are too afraid to actually put pen to page, largely because of like perfectionism. But your first
Mm-hmm.
draft is going to be terrible. Let it be terrible. My first drafts are, whew, nobody should ever read them. And that's okay. And then I also tell young people, aspiring writers, to eavesdrop. Um, Discreetly, don't get caught, because you don't want to be that creep listening on somebody else's conversation. Like you don't want to be caught being the creep listening in on somebody else's conversation. But there's so much you can learn by listening to other people talk to each other. So
Yeah.
yeah, read, write, eavesdrop. Those are my tips. Pro tips.
Awesome. Have you? Okay. So I have to ask this question. So Tanaji Coates, I love his writing, but he's made the leap to the comic books.
Hmm.
Are you in any way, shape, or form thinking about doing a comic book?
Comic books. No, I do write prose for Marvel.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the second book in the Shuri series. So Black Panther's little sister, like I write prose novels
Uh-huh.
about her. So I'm working on the third one right now. But yeah, I tried like the former publisher of Marvel Comics is a mentor of mine, and he tried to get me to write comics for a long time. And I
Yeah,
don't know, the format is tricky.
yeah. It's a little
Especially for
different.
like as a prose writer, like I describe things in words. So
Mm,
having to trust somebody to put it in a picture is I,
hmm.
I bet maybe
Yeah,
I'll try it eventually.
yeah,
I love reading them though. I love reading
yeah.
comics.
Also, and that brings me to, I know you just showed us Shuri. What other things are you working on that you want us to know about? Because I like your stuff a lot. So
Thanks. I have a really fun. So let's see. I have 4 books coming out this year. Oh, okay. Did you
uh,
hear that bang?
uh,
My son's room is above my office. This is I got to restructure the house. It's like thunder when he's in his room. But no, this comes out February 2nd. I
okay.
have a book that I wrote with 5 friends that comes out on June 22nd. That's called Blackout. August 31st is the follow up. So this is Clean Getaway. This came out last year,
About
but
that for my daughter.
Smooth,
Hmm.
yes, it just came out in paperback. But the main character in this book frequently talks about this girl he likes, and
Mm.
so I wrote her own book, and that comes out August 31st. I'm really excited about that book. It's called, I'm going to tell you this, even though it hasn't announced. It's called Fast Pitch,
Mm.
and it's do you have you seen The Sandlot? You've seen The Sandlot.
Yes. Oh yeah. Come on
Of
now.
course, right. I'm like, we're like in the same age range. You've
Yeah.
definitely seen The Sandlot. It's a Sandlot retelling about a softball team of little black girls. So like,
Oh,
oh, I'm so excited about it. So yeah, that one will come out
okay.
August 31st, and then November 2nd is the third Cherie novel,
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
and then
And
maybe I'll
it,
get to that.
hey, you are very busy. You are very busy. So how can people follow you and, just what social media platforms can they follow you on?
The only one that matters is Instagram. Like I'm on the other ones, but like don't bother. I'm at Nic Stone, NICSTONE on Instagram. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at GetNicked, GETNICCED. And then
Mhm.
on TikTok, I think I'm at like writer. I don't even know what my handle is on TikTok because I use it so frequently. But it's something like Nic Stone Writes, writer Nic Stone, something like. Eh.
Nick Stone, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I am going to see if we have any questions from the audience right now. So, um, members in the audience, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If not, I am going to ask you your thoughts. Have you um, the stuff that has happened in the past couple of weeks with the stuff at the Capitol? Um, have you thought about and then at the same time the stuff at the Capitol, but then we had two senators from Georgia that were elected. Have you thought
Yes.
about using that material in some shape or form? And how much do these real world events do you like take and capture and be like, you know what? I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna keep this in the back of my head, and I'm gonna use this for, some material down the road. Do you do that as an author?
Absolutely. I mean, I could probably use something similar to the insurrection at the Capitol in this third book in the kind of the Dear Martin universe. I probably
Mm.
will use something like that because
Mm.
it's about an
Oh,
election. Like the third book is
yeah.
about a class election. And so
Um,
I'm actually glad you said that because it's not a bad idea. Um, yeah, and like, oh man, I cannot tell you, like, the week of the presidential election, like the 4 days after, I thought I was gonna die because it was just like the tension of waiting to see like all of the votes get counted and like, is Georgia gonna turn blue? Is like
right.
what's gonna happen? It was so stressful. And then when we
Yeah.
had this runoff again, I was like, oh my God, I just want to go to sleep for like 3 days until it's over. But it has been such an interesting past couple of years, has it not?
Yes.
Even past few
Yes.
months, like the past few months have been, I feel like we all need like a collective vacation from life.
I know, right? I know. I was watching one of the late night comedians, and he said, this week has actually felt like a really long week, something that we have not had in a long time,
Yeah,
because you don't have to be glued to the news to see what this person is going to do. So yeah,
right. Yeah.
I, def- I definitely agree with that. So, let's see. I think I got one. Okay, I do have one question. Would the current pandemic affect the future storylines that you write, perhaps with the focus on people of color minorities being affected by it? So the pandemic would have something to do with future storylines.
It might, I think I would have to be like super far removed. Like it would have to be like a few years from now when I'm not like,
Mhm.
we're still in it. It could like, yeah, I never know what inspiration is going to hit me, right? So absolutely, there's definitely a chance of something pandemic related popping up in some book of mine in the future. Right now, I'm like focused on writing things that are fun. And I think part of the reason I'm focused on things that are fun is because like life kind of isn't necessarily super fun right now. So I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
escaping into Wakanda, which has been so fantastic. Like just getting to like live in Wakanda and create
yeah.
things in Wakanda has been really great. And then there's a couple of like other adventure type stories that I'm working on that I'm excited about. So we'll see, maybe.
Okay. One more question came in. Uh, what type of sci-fi movies do you like?
Ooh, my favorite, oh my gosh, nobody judge or clown me. My favorite sci-fi movie is The Fifth Element with Bruce Willis and and
With Chris
is
Tucker?
it Mila Jovovich? Oh my gosh, that's my favorite Chris Tucker role. Like my favorite role I've ever seen Chris Tucker in is is as Ruby
Who's
Rod.
it?
Like
Right.
I
Corbin.
yes, this is how you know. Like that's when you find out that Chris Tucker can actually act because he killed that role. And then the bad guy is
Not
oh man,
Bruce Willis.
no, not Bruce Willis. The bad guy is Gary Oldman. Gary
Oh yeah.
Oldman is such a fantastic actor. It took me like I have loved The Fifth Element since it came out years and years and years ago, but it
Yeah.
took me forever to connect that Gary Oldman from The Fifth Element is the same dude that is in the Christian Bale Batman movies.
Yeah.
The
That's
inspector
crazy.
guy whose name I can't remember right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He's Gordon. He's Commissioner
Yes,
Gordon.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Gordon. Him. Yes,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, yes, but yes, that's my favorite sci-fi movie.
One question offline came in. Said something about have you considered any acting roles?
No. So I was actually talking to a friend about this earlier. Part of the reason that I haven't gotten super into TikTok is because I don't like performing. Like the person that you're seeing now, this is me all day, every day. Like I'm pretty much
Mm-hmm.
always on 10, super vivacious. But I don't think I could act because I don't like to pretend. Um, I can pretend when I'm writing books, but it's because like it's me acting as this like God figure over this world that I'm creating. But like me trying to act, oh no. I did
Mm-hmm.
read, I have read some of my own audiobooks though. That's like the closest I've gotten.
Oh yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
Hey, I just got a text from. It said something about have you ever considered collaboration with Tyler Perry since you in Georgia?
Oh, of course, I'd love to, but you know, he hard to get to. I literally live like 6 minutes from his studio.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay.
I pass it every time I come home. I'm like, hey, Tyler.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because Tyler Perry's studio, I heard is like it was the old
It was a military base,
right Confederate military
a
base.
Confederate military base. He's like, oh, got him.
Georgia has a lot of history. It has a lot of history.
It
Well,
does.
Well, thank you again. That's basically it. That's all the questions that we have for you. I have really enjoyed this, so I'm a fan, and hey, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to just kind of chat with you for a little bit. And hey, don't forget about us, Riviera Beach, Florida. Um,
How are those
come.
COVID numbers? I need to go on vacation.
Uh, not
Okay,
right
enough said.
now.
Enough not said. I got you.
Not right now. But when they clear up Riviera Beach, hey,
It
it's
sounds
a nice
lovely.
town. Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely come down. But yeah, thank you again. And we don't have any other chats. This will conclude. Thank you again for being our guest. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night. Take care.
All right.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.